everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and we're going to continue now with our ongoing series of classic anime titles, and this is now a renowned classic and regarded one of the greatest animes of all time, and we're going to talk about Ninja Scroll, which was released in 1993. It was directed by Yoshiaki Kawajiri, who is responsible for other, I believe, great titles such as Wicked City, Monster City, Cyber City, Away the Way, and also Vampire Hunter The Bloodlust as well. And it was also set by the production company Madhouse, who's responsible for all of those titles that I just mentioned on here. And for me, Ninja Scroll, yeah, it is up there amongst, the all-time greats. It's been renowned over the years, and it's every bit as famous as amongst the people considered the true top tier level of animes such as Akira, Ghost in the Shell, and Fist of the North Star. And it's just been renowned for years and years and years for its just great animation, and it's just great storytelling and storyboarding. So it was originally released in 1993. It was released in cinemas later on, but I think overall time it built up a massive reputation when it was released in VHS. I think it was around about 1994, 1995 when it was released on VHS on here. So it's just truly fantastic. So the setup here is set in feudal Japan. We have a situation where there's plague that is kind of outbreak in Japanese village on here, and we have a soul ninja vagabond named Jubei who is hired to come in and investigate what's going on here. So he interacts with a female ninja called Kagero, who is part of this ninja team of the Mochizuki clan from the Mochizuki village, and they are all sent in to investigate what's going on with this plague. And later on they come across various villains and antagonists, in particular this group of villains known as the Eight Devils of Kimon. And as we go on in the story, we find that there's a overarching plot to involving political advantage, involving the main threat, which is the Shogun of the Dark, who wants to kind of overthrow certain governments, and they use various amounts of gold and money to buy the best weaponry because they want to topple various other factions and governments going on within Japan. So that's really kind of the main synopsis of Ninja Scroll on here. And what I've got to say first of all is that the most stunning aspect of Ninja Scroll is the animation. The animation here is, I think perhaps one of the best ever that we've seen from any anime, past, present or future. It's got such a high production value. I've talked about this a lot with other Madhouse productions in previous reviews, that the distinctive aspect of Madhouse is that you do get high quality visuals, high quality animation. Everything is drawn to such a kind of explicit and really high level amount of detail. The way the frames and the characters flow and action sequences, they all have this really kind of smooth, kind of composed look and feel about them. Really, again, what I talk about anime a lot, having this really vivid cinematic feel to it, and Ninja Scroll is amongst the best. Everything from the colour design and the texture and the way the characters move and flow throughout, the way that each scene composes to the next. And it's not necessarily just the action scenes or the fight sequences, it's also just landscape and environment. We have great scenes where we just have waterfalls or kind of little butterflies within a forest, and it's all got this real vivid cinematic feel to it. It's kind of really almost an immersive experience. Some of the scenes that we see throughout this, it's just really fantastic. Just all organic color scheme throughout the whole animation on here. What makes this so great is the character design itself, and the way that the characters are drawn and the way they move, and there's certain fight sequences throughout. We see them using their sword fights and using various pellets and katanas, and it's just got a great kind of composition. The way that we see the characters flow from each angle, and as they do their various attacks and exhibit their various powers on it, it's all fantastic to watch. Now, another key aspect of Ninja Scroll is, of course, the tone, which is extremely adult orientated. This is going on really the likes of Wicked City and Yuri Tsukidoji, that really kind of adult R-rated direction that anime was kind of famous for when it broke out in the kind of mid-90s. We get explicit kind of sex and nudity scenes and violence. You got decapitations and arms cut off, and you know you have various language, and there's a rape scene in here as well, and it's really explicit stuff. So obviously if you're into your anime and you're not for the faint-hearted, then I don't think Ninja Scroll is going to be one that you might be able to handle as such. That's a bit of a warning, but I don't think that's a detriment to the actual movie itself. It's just, you know, this was really one of the core examples of really anime pushing the boundaries, pushing the limits in terms of its subject matter and its tone and its story telling on it. But it's all great, you know, like I said, it really is gripping and compelling to watch this kind of dark, R-rated, orientated tone that Ninja Scroll sets in here throughout. So this is all fantastic to watch, all great, and you know, really vivid stuff on here. So we're going to go on to the characters now, and we have the main antagonist in Jubei, who is this very kind of laid back, wisecracking ninja. You know, he's really got no sort of set direction or purpose. He's just more worried about the money and goes around from each job, you know, trying to collect as much as he can, right? So he's a very laid back, but he's still very honourable, you know. He's one of those typical anti-heroes, but I think he's got much more of a likeable persona about him. The other main character, of course, is Kagero. She's the kind of main female of the Mochizuki clan, and we see them at the beginning when the leaders are collaborating together to discuss on how they're going to tackle the epidemic, and she's very angry because she doesn't want to be left out, right? So in the beginning, Kagero is kind of this very headstrong, very stubborn, hardened kind of personality, but as the story develops and moves on, and as we see her more develop a relationship with Jubei, we see there's a much more of a vulnerable, softer side to her. This is someone who, without giving too much away, really, if you like, lacks a kind of social interaction, lacks a social identity with people. She's very much in and amongst on her own all the time, and she keeps herself very hidden. So I think once she makes a connection with someone, she's much more vulnerable. She doesn't really know how to handle it as such. Yeah, she gives a lot of fierce exterior, and you know, she's constantly insulting Jubei and telling him that, you know, she doesn't really need him and she can do everything on her own. But as human nature, the more you show on the outside, the more you're kind of hiding more on the inside. And I think that it's a great, fascinating character of Kagero on here. And as we see her more vulnerabilities, we see a much more, if you like, there's a much more heartfelt character deep inside all the kind of, you know, the warrior-like exterior that she paints out on the forefront on it. We also have Dakawan, who's a, you know, short kind of old guy with his hat on here and his stick, and he's a Tokugawan spy, and he's sent in to basically investigate what's going on with the Eight Devils of Kimon, and later on what's involving with the Shogun of the Dark, which is the main threat throughout the story on here. Now, one of the other distinctive aspects, I mentioned the character design, but in particular we go on to the Eight Devils Kimon, and I think these are amongst the best kind of diverse kind of villains or henchmen within any anime that we've seen on here. You know, they've got this vast array of abilities and powers and fighting styles and fighting techniques, and they're just a fascinating group of villains throughout on here. So the first one, Tesai, and really Tesai, when I remember when the trailers come out and all the hype came out about Ninja Scroll, he was kind of the main feature piece, because he's this big bulking brute, and if you see the trailers, we see how he rolls around. He's able to turn himself into stone, and he's got this big massive sword on here, and yeah, and he was really kind of one of the big selling points for me when I saw the initial footage of Ninja Scroll. The way the animation, you see his morphing effect and how he turns into stone, it's all great on there. We have Benisatu, who again is a very much of a striking villain. She's got a more kind of chameleon shapeshifter. She's able to kind of merge herself into different kind of personas, and we see that she's very much got a connection with snakes, and she's able to kind of intertwine and merge and manipulate snakes on her. And there are very vivid and strong sequences involving Benisatu on it. And then next we've got Yami Maru, who's kind of like the second command, if you like, of the Eight Devils Kimon, and he's got this distinctive look about him. He's got this really kind of wide shoulder kind of orientated outfit about him on here, and he's got this cool device. He's kind of got this metal wire, and it's very distinct because somehow he's able to transport it amongst longer distances, you know, and he can trap people around the metal wire sometimes when they don't even know that they've got the metal wire around them, and he's able to manipulate that across, you know, different people. And it's also a fascinating character because he's clearly a gay character. Again, this is a great thing about anime. It was able to just show these characters whether they were heterosexuals, bisexuals, or homosexual, and it just never made any bigger deal about it. You know, I think that's a lesson, you know, current entertainment could use as well. You know, it would just show these characters as they are. And again, he's got a very attraction to the main leader, Gemma, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then he has jealous tendencies across other people who get involved with Gemma on here as well. So he's a fascinating character on here as well. So we also have Sakura, whose main ability, she's able to control the gunpowder, if you like. So again, she's kind of got this attraction to Yami Maru, and she hates the fact that he doesn't reflect the same feelings back. But again, she's very diverse designed, very diverse looking on here, and like I said, she's able to command explosives and gunpowders on here. We have another blind swordsman who isn't as distinctive a character as the others, but again, he has a great fight sequence with Jubei, and I just love his design. And because he's blind, he's able to focus on his other senses, and he's got this big massive sword, and again, he's able to manipulate light, and that's kind of his equalizer against people who still have their sight, and he doesn't. And he says, you know, your sight is a weakness to you. We also have another enemy who is able to control bees, and he's very kind of small, kind of hunchback, misshapen kind of figure on here. And again, he's able to have bees that come out of his back, and this is a great sequence that we see him involved when he encounters Jubei, and we see Kagero. She's got to use this kind of stunning kind of pollen effect to kind of neutralize the bee attacks that he uses on here. So that's also fantastic. We have another enemy who is kind of dressed in purple, and what's distinctive about him, he's able to kind of camouflage himself into different environments and different landscapes, and we see him just popping out different kind of surfaces, and you see his shadow coming up on the floor, and he's able to emerge from the trees on there. And again, just very stylized, very diverse, and very fascinating use of powers and abilities on here. I mentioned, of course, before, the main leader in Genma. You know, he's, as we know, has got a previous backstory and previous history with Dubai, and we find out later on the reasons for that and why there's a kind of animosity between the two. And he's very ambitious, and we find out later on what his main motivations are, and he basically wants to kind of dominate and rule all the governments, you know, whether it's the Michizukis or the Tokugawa government or even the Shogun of the Dark. So he's that very ambitious villain that wants to dominate everything. And he's very distinctively drawn as well. If you look at his facial features on here, you know, very kind of muscular, kind of ripped tone figure on here. And that's another aspect I want to talk about. So again, the Eight Devils come on, fascinating, very diverse array of henchmen on it. And particularly, I've mentioned in previous reviews, Madhouse Productions, you see the distinctive style of characters and the way that the kind of aesthetic is drawn. You know, you've got these really vivid kind of aesthetic of faces, so you'll have a lot of these kind of sharpened edges and angular faces throughout, narrow noses and kind of big chins and kind of detailed faces on it, very kind of triangular kind of drawn kind of shapen figures, and very muscular kind of ripped lean kind of physiques that they've shown throughout each of the kind of characters that they draw on it. It's just all brilliant to watch. It's really kind of just really catches your attention, really pops out, you know, visually as well on this. So again, very stylized, distinctive way of animation on it. This is another great feature about Ninja Scroll. What really sets Ninja Scroll, you know, amongst the top tier is that the way it builds its tension and its jeopardy on here. You know, yes, there's plenty of action and effects and fight sequences, but it does it in such a structured way. So it will bring you into a scene. You'll have characters come into a scene, and you will have moments of silence, and then you'll have this great music as well. It's really kind of tense, kind of atmospheric music but on here, and that's really a great measure of any kind of great animation or movie, where the cinematography, the music, the production, and the animation, they all flow together. They all kind of compensate and complement one another in these great scenes on here. Like I said, vivid colour scheme, loads of really vivid greens and reds and yellows throughout here. They all merge together to, you know, end up get a really great result on it. So this is truly fantastic. This is really like top tier, you know, production values on here. So the only negatives I could really fault about Ninja Scroll really is that we could argue that the plot is fairly simplistic. Again, without going into too much spoiler details, there's not really much depth in terms of the story. It's just basically an investigation into the plague and the 8 devils have come on, and then we kind of get a standard kind of confrontation at the end, and that's kind of it. There's no kind of inner depths or inner levels, if you like, to the story it's trying to tell. And again, this is if you're being overly critical on here. The only other aspect really is that if you look at the plot itself, without spoiling too much, it's very similar to Wicked City, where basically you have a group of characters and they're involved in a kind of struggle between opposing factions, and they have to investigate and they build a connection over time. So it doesn't really get any points of originality in terms of its storyline. It's very heavily borrowed from Wicked City, which ironically, like I said, is the main anime that is by the same director and the same production in Madhouse. So again, it doesn't get any points for originality on here, and maybe there's a certain lack of momentum. You could argue it doesn't really pull the action scenes beat for beat for beat. It's kind of more singular moments as it measures its stories throughout on here. But again, this is just really being hypercritical on here. But I think overall, if you come across this first time, you won't really be bothered about that. You're just going to be so transfixed and blown away by the high level of production and animation on it. It absolutely holds up today. This would hold up against any kind of current anime that you want to throw out there at the moment. In fact, it probably is superior. Alright, because of the amount of depth and detail and time taken into all the animation. I think the problem with today's animation is it's very quick cut and shortcut, and you can see with the certain frames and the kind of time taken and the way that the characters are drawn that there's not as much effort being put into it. It's kind of just, let's just jumble it together and put it out there. Whereas Ninja Scroll, you can really appreciate the effort and the time taken in rendering all these characters together, and it's all just top tier stuff. So if I had to give an overall score for Ninja Scroll, I would give it a 9.4 out of 10. Just truly amongst the elite of anime, you know, top tier standard. And yes, I would put it up there amongst the greatest animes ever. You know, this is, you know, really like classic level stuff on here. I do know that there have been further productions. I know that there's a kind of series of Ninja Scroll. I think it was like a 12 or 13 part, and they've tried a few sequels here or there. I haven't really seen them at the moment. Maybe if I get more time, I'll take the time to watch the series and review it a lot more on here. But I don't think they've been widely regarded as well as this animation on here. You know, sadly, you know, we didn't get a fully feature-length Ninja Scroll 2 on the same production level as the first movie here, which is unfortunate on here. But yeah, I think if you just stick to this is a really kind of, you know, hardcore anime classic. I think you'd love, even if you watched it way back when it was released, even if you watch it right now. I just think there's very little ways I can really criticise Ninja Scroll. It's just one of those top tier classic essential animes that you have to absolutely watch, whether you're old school, new school, or even you're an anime hardcore fan. Just as a standard animation movie, it really is high quality classic stuff. So that's my thoughts and comments on Ninja Scroll. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you really enjoy Ninja Scroll? Do you agree with me that you think it's up there in that top tier of classic animes? Or do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's not as good as what many people have renowned it to be? So let me know in your comments below. I'll continue to keep reviewing these classics as I come along. So that's it for now. Stay at safe distances, take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.